This is Cybel Martin, and you're listening to Cinepod, the Cinematography podcast.
The following podcast contains explicit language. You're listening to the Cinematography podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image and the people who make it happen. Coming to you from the world headquarters of Hot Rod Cameras in Hollywood, California, are your hosts, Ben Rock and Ilya Friedman.
Hey, Ilya.
Hey, Ben. How are you?
I'm doing delightfully. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm delightfully as well. Hey, Ben, who's on the show today?
We have an amazing cinematographer, Cybel Martin, who most recently shot 3 of the 8 episodes of the new Amazon Prime series, A League of Their Own. But also, she's a big horror fan, so she and I had a lot to talk about. She shot a really cool horror movie called Black as Night that I will heartily recommend to anyone who wants to check it out. Also on Amazon Prime.
Nice.
And she's got some sci-fi stuff coming up, and she's a wonderful person. She loves her work. I'm sometimes reminded in the bitterness that I swim in that this job is supposed to be fun, and sometimes we talk to people like Cybel or Seamus McGarvey who remind me that this can be a blast. Like, this should be fun. It should be a big, creative, fun experience where you get to do really cool stuff. So she's already doing really big things. I expect to see only bigger and bigger things out of Cybel Martin over the next few years. Like, she's kind of blowing up right now.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, what are we talking about for Close Focus today?
Man, it's kind of an Armageddon over at HBO Max with the merger of Warner Brothers, the entire Warner Brothers library, and Discovery. Oh my God, they're just taking stuff off the platform.
Yeah, they really are. It's kind of nuts. And it seems like a random hodgepodge of stuff, too. It's like, yeah, a lot of it's their own original content, and they didn't really give a really clear reason as to why. They were just doing some rejiggering of stuff or something.
And like one of them was the Hervé Villechaize movie starring Peter Dinklage that came out like maybe last year or the year before. It's relatively recent stuff, some of it. And then some of it's legacy stuff. And I mean, it's on, and I know we talked about this last week, the literal canceling of the Batgirl movie after it was made and they spent $90 million on it. It's kind of a head scratcher.
Yeah, and kids stuff and family stuff. Infinity Train, I watched some of that animated series and I quite enjoyed it. I mean, it's really sort of, all I can guess is they're going to spin off to some sort of like kids channel or something. I don't know, but to remove it from HBO before you actually even have that, I mean, to me, all those people who might have been in the middle of watching some of these series, I don't care if it's Ellen's Next Great Designer or Close Enough. And Close Enough is brilliant, by the way. I loved Close Enough. And I didn't finish the last season. So the fact that that's gone now is going to be really disappointing to me.
Camping, which is also a pretty recent series, just gone. And the thing is that I don't believe, maybe I'm wrong about this, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe any of these exist on Blu-ray or DVD or can be really acquired anywhere else. HBO Max was it. Just today, they announced they're also canceling a Matt Reeves run Batman animated series. It's a little baffling, and if I may editorialize, the fact that it's being acquired by Discovery and the fact that, yes, a lot of people watch Game of Thrones, for instance, but also a lot of people watch reality television, and Discovery networks are better known for reality television than they are for narrative fiction kind of content. I'm a little terrified that we're going to just start seeing a ramping down of HBO style premium movies, TV series and stuff like that, and just see more, if I do say so, goofy reality shows that I would never watch.
To me, it just seems like an obvious money grab. It feels to me like they're spinning off, they're taking some content so they can sell it to you elsewhere. And it's one thing, like I understand when Netflix is licensing like content from Starz, or they're licensing content from some other platform, from somewhere else, they're putting it on their channel, and at some point that license expires, and there's usually like a big, hey, this is going away. You're going to want to watch this. It's going away at this time. And I understand that they're removing that. But when they create their own original intellectual property and then choose not to put it on their own platform, as HBO is doing right now, that means that
So weird.
even though you were paying that monthly subscription fee, you no longer have access to the stuff you thought you had access to. And in a world where people are increasingly not owning the media that they have access to, they're just, leasing it or renting it for a day or two, or having these subscription services, you kind of anticipate that some of that stuff is going to be there for you, especially when you're getting it from the people who created it in the first place. And then when it's gone, it's kind of like the rug being yanked out from under you. It's really unsettling. And if they had a plan to spin it off and charge more money, they kind of should have done that a while ago, but I guess it's still the early days. So who knows what will happen? Who knows how many ways they will bifurcate HBO Max, Discovery, and whatever the next channel that they do to try to get more revenue from their subscribers.
Yeah, and I know we're never, I shouldn't say never, it's just unlikely that we go back to a packaged media kind of world with DVD. I saw an interesting clip that was kind of floating around on Twitter of Matt Damon being interviewed about, why aren't these movies being made, the kinds of stuff that, that he really cut his teeth on in the 90s mostly. And he talked about, the difference in the streaming market versus the DVD or the packaged media market, where you'd go to a bookstore, you'd go to Best Buy, you'd go to Target or whatever, and you would buy these DVDs. They had huge rows and rows upon rows of DVDs, and it was an enormous profit center. A lot of times a movie would be released theatrically almost just so people would know about it when it was released on DVD and to increase DVD sales. And in the world that we're in now, you don't get that. You sort of get like a collective, if I may, shit pile of stuff on every streaming service. I'm not saying that the projects are shit. I'm saying that like nothing is given special attention or
curation.
Yeah, like the sense of curation is that the fact that HBO made it got curated. And HBO, I think, is better at pushing their stuff than, say, Netflix. I mean, they all make good stuff, and then they all acquire good stuff. But like outside of niche services like Shudder, which I know I talk about a lot, but I feel like a lot of the services could take a lesson from Shudder, which is curated by people who love the movies that they're curating. So it wouldn't make any difference if it was horror like Shudder or sci-fi or romantic comedies or straight up comedies. Like if there was a streaming comedy network that curated really amazing comedy stuff, that was both legacy stuff and new stuff, I feel like people who were fans of that genre would flock to it. But I feel like what's happening is these mega streamers are trying to be everything to everyone. I would say except for Disney Plus, who just seems to really know their audience unbelievably well. But like Prime and HBO Max and Netflix especially are just trying to be everything to everyone. But this purge, I mean, there's no other way to describe it. It's just a purge of quality premium content. Like, again, you should expect to see, that Peter Dinklage film just on HBO's streaming service for eternity. They spent a lot of money making it, and it's just gone.
I don't know. Maybe it'll get repurposed to another streaming service, maybe a competitor. I'm not sure what's going to happen. We'll certainly find out. I mean,
I feel like Warner has like a weird history though of being like becoming part of AOL, then becoming part of AT&T. Like I feel like they're just getting passed around, and so they end up with kind of the stank of whatever corporation they're a part of. And Discovery Networks is obviously an enormous juggernaut of a company, but it's just crazy to me that they would bother to merge with them and then just be like, shelve movies and get rid of series. And I feel like we're only at the beginning. We're going to see all kinds of stuff getting canceled and not picked up off of HBO Max.
I don't mean to beg to differ, but let's not forget that a lot of studios have had different ownership for periods of time. Like Sony was a Coca-Cola company for a long time, and Universal was a division of Seagram's. It's like there's a lot of and before then, even earlier, they were Panasonic for a little while. It's like it's a very interesting history of some of these places and how different companies decide they're going to come into Hollywood and shake things up, and then inevitably it doesn't necessarily work out the way they thought, and then it becomes somebody else's.
No, you're right. Actually, that gives me a little bit of comfort. Thank you for bringing that up.
Sure. All right. Hey, let's get to the interview with Cybel Martin.
All right.
The Cinematography Podcast Interview.
So we are here today, actually in Los Angeles, which is a rarity these days. We're usually talking to somebody in, wherever, Australia. But in Los Angeles, we're talking to Cybel Martin. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Cybel.
Thank you for having me. This is a treat.
I watched your feature, which we'll talk about a little bit first, because I'm a giant horror nerd. I watched your feature, Black as Night.
Awesome.
And really enjoyed it. An amazing horror film with kind of an angle that we hadn't seen before. I was curious while watching it, like, what were the influences? I felt a strong influence of Attack the Block. But I wanted to know, like, from you, what were the things that were kind of going through your head? Kind of give me the pitch of the movie, if you could.
The pitch of the movie. So the director and I loved working together. We both devour horror movies. I love horror movies. Like, horror movies are like my comfort food. Like, if I'm really stressed out, I just need to watch a horror movie and it just like brings everything down. It's like good.
What's your favorite?
Oh God. I mean, just off the top. Carrie and then The Shining, those two I could watch monthly and just be filled with so much joy. They make me, I love 70s horror. I love like things that happen during the daytime. There's just something really great about 70s horror. They're almost shot romantically, and then they're also just like this chaos and carnage. But I'll watch any horror movie, quite honestly. But so for Blackest Night, both Marty, the director, and I were lovers of 30 Days of Night. And so that was a big reference. We were also, because even though it's a horror movie, we wanted still to plant the story in some sort of, not realism, but some sort of reality. So I know we both looked at the movie Girlhood. We wanted like the New Orleans daytime stuff just to feel rich and beautiful and just really lean into all the characteristics of New Orleans and just in terms of color and texture, so that when we get to the nighttime stuff, then you really feel the inky blacks, you really feel the doom. But 30 Days of Night definitely was like a big one for us.
You kind of went into it a little bit, but it's a movie that takes place in New Orleans in which our protagonist is bitten by a vampire that's like a homeless person, basically. And I thought it was an interesting take on the vampire genre to kind of, we're so used to seeing, especially in New Orleans, we're used to seeing Lestat. We're used to seeing like regality with vampires. But in this case, it was homeless
vampires.
People. Yeah, which is a really unique take. I've never seen that idea. We're used to seeing our vampires as like rich, aristocratic people. But, you're talking a little bit about creating a visual dichotomy between the daytime and the nighttime stuff. And the daytime stuff feels kind of naturalistic in a way, like featuring the beauty of New Orleans and the the interesting architecture and all that stuff. Right. And then the night stuff is like very colorful and very, very different.
Fun.
Yeah. So when you're doing something with that kind of a dichotomy, where did you come up with the ideas of what colors to use? What was the palette? You were talking about like the inky blacks, because it's like it goes super dark in the frame, stuff like that. What were you thinking about as you were constructing the plan?
Like a lot of times when I'm trying to feel what the visuals are, like I just get inspired. I'm inspired just what's naturally there and what colors are just speaking to me naturally. Like if this story had taken place in a different city, other colors are just naturally going to start speaking to me. And I think just on a subconscious level, New Orleans just has its own colors.
For sure.
I know this is how I function, but I don't usually articulate it. Something in me will just go, oh, indigo. And I'm not even really thinking about why indigo, but as we're talking, it's like, well, yeah, New Orleans, key colors are purple, green, and gold. And on some level, those were really important colors for me. Did it ever show up in a lookbook? I don't know. But that will influence me. And then also, like cinematography, because you've interviewed all of us, there's trends. And I just don't want to do the same color palette that I'm seeing other people do. It usually starts because one person did it and everyone's like, oh my God, that's amazing. Like back in film school, we saw Seven, everyone tried to shoot everything like Seven or, you just get inspired, and that's cool. But at this stage of the game, I really just try to find something that I feel is unique for the project. But I knew that it just felt correct that the whole film just have a lot of color and lots of richness, which is just inherent in New Orleans. Again, if this was shot, like in San Francisco, it would be different. This was shot in Portland, it would be different. But New Orleans is so much about richness and color and texture, and certainly got a lot of that just from the locations that we were shooting in. They just exuded that, and just you had to lean into it, especially on like a lower budget film. The best way to get production value is to lean into what's there. And
for sure,
you can't really mess up if you film in New Orleans.
I know, it's just gorgeous. You're just going to get stuck in rain. That's really
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. We had a lot of that. Lots of like lightning delays and stuff. So
beautiful film. This is a sidebar conversation you and I can have. But I feel like a lot of times I get this belief from people that horror is a debased genre or whatever. And it's like, you watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That movie is gorgeous. It is beautiful.
It is.
It's a classic for a reason.
Yeah. We could do a whole podcast talking about cinematography of horror movies.
Oh my God. And I want to.
About it. Like, are you kidding? Like some of the best cinematography ever been done in horror movies.
Ilya, my co-host, he is not the horror fan that I am. And it's not that he's against it. He'll watch a horror movie. But like, I'm always talking about how I feel like some of the best work is done in that genre.
Yes.
I think very rarely do they get their due.
Yeah.
What is it as a fan, but also as a DP, that drives you to horror? I feel like some of the most interesting stuff ever, take any moment in film history, some of the most interesting stuff is being done in horror or science fiction, and horror is where I would go. But like, what is it that kind of keeps you energized about the genre?
Okay, let me see if I can put this into words, because this is definitely something where I'll spiral out of control with so much enthusiasm.
Please.
Let me gather all of my thoughts. So I love horror. In terms of all the genres, it's one of the best ones to deal with just basic human stories, strangely enough. Like my favorite horror movies, if you were to take the supernatural out of it, it's still a solid movie. You still have character development and anguish and all the plot points. I mean, you talk about Carrie, you take the supernatural out of Carrie, it is still about a teenage girl who's been in a protective household, who's socially awkward and doesn't know how to be in this world. She's smart, but not, now she's a gift. It wouldn't have to be supernatural. It could just be that she's smart. It could just that suddenly she's good at football, whatever. But then using the supernatural, then you get to heighten it and you get to really underscore emotions in a much more powerful way that you couldn't in a drama, because a drama has to adhere to reality. And so then when it comes to the cinematography of horror, it's, in my opinion, the best genre. And I'm like scanning my head to make sure I still feel this is true. I feel like horror is the best genre for cinematographers to try out a visual that is not based in reality. Like I did a short stint doing music videos, did not last. That is a hard world. But I envy my friends who did stay in shooting music videos, because it's just anything goes visually. Anything goes. There is no reality. It's just visual. It's just visual. A little sort of commercial world, but they still will try to often still have some sort of narrative. But then in the horror genre, the second you establish the rules of the film, meaning I'm really passionate about the opening scene of any feature film. It's like, that's when you set up what's reality, what's normal. And in a horror movie, like if all the walls are red and then the first scene, all the walls are red, okay, then that's just what it is. It's not a big deal. If everyone's skin is green, and that's just it. Okay, fine. Then so once you establish like what the visual rules are, first scene, boom, there you go. Then that's what's real. And you get to do that in horror movies. You get to just create you are not adherent to a reference to what a time period really looked like. There are no rules visually.
When you were saying that, I was thinking about the opening sequence in Dario Argento's Suspiria, where he establishes just this wackadoodle lighting plot. Good, yeah. Like the lighting is just so funky and weird in that movie.
All of this stuff, yeah.
But then you just accept it though, like you just kind of roll with it.
Exactly,
and it's so cool.
Exactly, and that's exactly it. It's like being a filmmaker is like recreating like dreams almost. It's like you're always dealing with like representation of things, like especially in horror movies. A house can represent where someone lives, but it can also represent like their inner world. And you can just really dig into all these things of what things mean. Like a tree in a horror movie could just mean more than just a tree. And then for someone like myself who wants to overthink every single choice, it is so much fun. Like I can do an hour being like, well, what does the tree here mean? I mean, like The Conjuring, and the tree, it's just like, oh my God. Or actually, no, not The Conjuring, Sinister. That's what I was thinking of. Because I just rewatched it and love Sinister. And so that's why I love horror movies, certainly to shoot them, is that you just start from scratch. It's like, what is this world? How do you see this world? And if it's a good script, you have a sense of what that world is. Like you naturally feel it like, oh, it's really yellow and it's an acidy yellow. It's not a canary yellow, or it's, it's very desaturated, but purple pops because of this, or red pops because of blood, or, in these scenes, we're seeing through the monster's eyes. So it's going to get, it's going to be grainy, or it's going to be like whatever it is that you're making up. And like people know, I love to always refer to crayons. So it's like you're working with a full box of 64. Like you just have all these tools at your disposal. You are not hemmed into any visual rule. And just what a treat. Like what fun. That's why I love horror movies.
That's awesome. So A League of Their Own, which just dropped as we're recording this, I don't know, a week or two?
Last week, Friday.
Yeah.
So August 12th.
Yeah. And congratulations.
Thank
you. You shot out of the 8 episodes, didn't you shoot, I think, 4 of them, right?
No, I shot 3 of them.
3 of them. And so, first hacky question, but like, what brought you to that project? How did you end up on that project?
Woo, boy, how did I end up on that project? I think Delmar recommended me. She was already on the project and recommended me as the alternating DP. And then the usual course went through my agent. And my agent was really enthusiastic about this. And my agent has really good taste. So I listened to her. Like my mindset about work is on one level, and my agent, adore her, always has a much broader view of the industry and where I can go. And I've noticed over time that I have a more limited concept of what my next step will be. And she's like, no, this is what we're doing. And so I've just learned to trust my agent a lot. And she loved A League of Their Own. She thought it was a great opportunity for me. And I saw the pilot and I was like, I don't know, but it was like, I'd just done American Horror Stories. Horror movies are my comfort zone. So a part of me would be like, just thrilled just to do horror movies for the rest of my life.
Noted.
But it was like, but I need to diversify. I need to, like you don't just shoot things that you enjoy. You want to like protect your future career. So, like, it's not like you just keep shooting and that you'll always have these opportunities to do a 1940s large budget period piece, on sports and women and like multiple, all the stuff that came in A League of Their Own. I can't take that for granted. And I can't assume that kind of opportunity will show up all the time. Like, oh yeah, I had never done a period piece. And so there were so many things in there that were really beneficial for me for like stuff I'd like to do in the future and people I'd like to work with. And so it was the pilot. I was like, oh, the pilot's cute, but it was reading the future scripts. And it's like when you like, I'm sure all DPs are like this, or I don't know, I am anyway. Like I read scripts and it's always greedy. Like you go through a script and you're like, okay, dialogue, okay, yak. Oh, and okay. Oh, but there's a scene shot and you start getting, your mouth is watering, your DP mouth is watering. You're like, oh my God. Like, so one of my greatest passions in life are speakeasies and house parties. Yeah, I just love speakeasies. I've watched any movie, any TV show that remotely relates, has a speakeasy scene in it. I've probably seen them. I'm fascinated by that culture, the idea, even the modern day versions where everything is legal, but we still have to go through a kitchen and down a dark alleyway and make a hard left and like look for a light bulb. I love that. So when I got to the episode with the speakeasies and the house party, and my DP brain was like, oh my God, this could be really fun. Like this is really, there's dialogue, but it's like, oh, but all the things I get to shoot and the things I get to light, and there's a movie scene. And so that's what gets you is that, and I'm learning, it's this constant maturity in your career is that you can do something because in the moment it sounds fun, but you have to have a broader perspective. Like, is it going to be fun now? Does it represent the kind of work you want to have your name attached to? Does it make a difference in the general public? I've grown broader. Also, as I start to realize that I'm being offered more, sounds sort of like counter to what I was saying earlier, but with more opportunities, and you can kind of sift through and say, where do I want to align myself? And where do I want to throw my talents? And A League of Their Own just checked off a lot of boxes. I love sports. Everyone, I think, wants to shoot their own Rocky. So, but I love sports. I love women in sports. I love watching female athletes, how their body language is extremely different than anyone else, like just how they stand, and so I just got very excited about the prospect of translating that onto a screen. And again, the period piece, because I'd not shot a TV series that was a period piece. And so that was a huge opportunity. And then the dual stories of the Peaches and Max's world was very exciting to me. And it just offered a lot of things that I've never shot before. And they also just dovetail with things that interest me. And I do a lot of photography, and I'm also a painter. And so a lot of the themes in the show, they dovetail with my own personal work. And so I saw it as sort of like a continuation or a nice blending of my DP career and then painting and photography. And you just don't get that a lot. Not that I'm looking for it, but you just don't get that a lot. So I was really grateful for that I could bring my own aesthetic naturally to it versus sometimes you get a job and you feel like you're sort of pushing, or you're trying not to push your aesthetic on something. You're trying not to push what you feel is right. And it's like a balancing act. So anyway, long story, long still, but that's how I ended up on League.
It's all great. Well, it's interesting to hear kind of about the touch points for you that made it an interesting choice. And, I mean, anyone, kind of in your position where it's like you're on the radar and you're doing a lot of stuff that people are excited about. Like, I can imagine that you do get a lot of opportunities. So it's interesting to kind of hear how that all came together. And as someone who is old enough to have seen the original movie, A League of Their Own, in the theater, directed by Penny Marshall, shot by, I hope I don't butcher his name. I literally had the Amadeus poster on my wall for years, and so I've read his name a million times. Miroslav Ondrasic. I'm going to say Miroslav Ondrasic. He shot Amadeus, which is
brilliant,
one of the greatest movies ever made.
Of all time.
But, Penny Marshall, no slouch, and A League of Their Own, a classic movie. Was there any reference to that with this? Because, I mean, I have seen it. I saw it in the theater. I actually worked in a movie theater when it came out. So I'd seen it a bunch of times. And I feel like it's got, obviously you're using modern technology, but was there any reference to the approach or the look that Miroslav got back then? Holy
not
crap.
from my episodes.
30 years ago.
Yeah.
30 years.
Ouch. You can delete that part. All numbers like that we can remove from this conversation.
That's awful.
I would say respectfully, no, it wasn't. I mean, there was never a conversation with Delmar or with our showrunners about replicating the movie. If you've seen the series, there's a lot that, there's a hat tip to the movie out of respect and adoration. And though our reference material was a lot of research, like one of the greatest things I've been experiencing of doing certainly television is all the researchers that you work with. And so we just got a lot of material about an actual night game that occurred, baseball game that occurred, or, about the Negro League, about the, women's baseball. We got all this research and all of this reference material, and the initial stories were the inspiration for me. The real people and the real, like, what photography was looking like at the time, which is always where I go to. It's like, I don't always want to repeat it, but I always research what did film or television or paintings or whatever, what did art look like at the time that we're shooting? So went back a lot to that and tried to mix it up and looked at some stuff that's a little more contemporary. We had a lot of conversations also about representing the time, but also we never wanted to feel oldie timey. Like, we never wanted to do like a sepia tone wash and like a soft, like a vignette, and it like softly goes to white and fades in and out. Like, we wanted the audience to feel like the story was happening right now. And so for that, if we were to go anything that harked back to oldie timey, whether it be referring to the original movie or exclusively to photography of that time, I don't know, it's just sort of playing it easy. And it's sort of, it's not a phoning it in, because that would still be a challenge, but it is kind of a phoning it in of like what your creative input is. But instead to say, how do we find that fine line between recognizing it's the 1940s and still making it feel like if our audience is there right now watching this unfold. So, I mean, we did things like playing with shutter angles, and we did things like adding color palette that may not have been the colors of that time, but it just felt right, and just sort of went with your instinct of, this is how it might have felt then. Maybe not how it looked or how it would have photographed, but this is how it would have felt then. We definitely use a lot more color than is in the movie. It's much more expressionistic. It's much more, like Wong Kar-wai was a big reference.
Oh,
Pretty much
nice.
everyone and their mother will try to sneak in the mood for love as a reference if they can. We're all
Well, it's
dying to
just such
shoot
an
that movie.
it's like the best, one of the best looking movies ever made.
Of all time. From now on, just start every interview with like, and so what do you think about In the Mood for Love? And then you go on like, and what's your name and whatever.
Yeah.
Like, just start with it.
They're like, never saw it. I'm like, well, we're not going to record.
Yeah, seriously. I don't know the
This
point.
is over.
I don't know the point. So that
Sorry,
so we
sorry. I know you won the Oscar, but off. Bye.
totally. It's not enough. It really isn't enough. So our office, and by the way, like offices are not for DPs. DPs shouldn't be in offices. But our production office was just plastered with all the reference material. And so there was a lot, again, from the actual stories of the women playing then and the Negro League. There's a lot of those, the research were in our office, and a lot of pictures from In the Mood for Love, and then like some Gordon Parks photography. And just like really, like we would just be pulling anything that felt right, that either felt emotional or felt athletic or like the sense of community or like all these words that we were trying to like gather and get represented visually. So yeah, so In the Mood for Love was a reference, and the use of color and how the color shows up in the cinematography and the lighting and in the production design and in the costume, how they all work so beautifully together. And that was our goal. I can't speak for the costume designer, the production designer, but certainly for me, I was always looking for, like, if they were dressed in one way, how does my lighting complement that? Or how does it work with that? And this, the different locations, and it evolved.
I mean, I have a wacky question that I should probably know the answer to, and I don't.
Uh-oh.
But when you're on a show like this and you're going back to the same location, like episode 4, I think is your first episode.
Correct.
But does that mean that you shot every frame in that episode from the beginning to the end? Or if there was a scene in one of the locations, like let's say they needed to do a pickup later, or they rewrote the script to accommodate something, as a team of DPs on the show. I mean, I'm not talking about like second unit-y stuff, but I'm talking about like a first unit scene. Do you ever pick one up for each other, or is it all just like you shoot episode 104 from beginning to end, and that's all you?
Yeah, I understand. On some shows, we've had it where one DP has a scene in a location, the other DP has another scene in that same location, and those are the only scenes in that location. One DP might just do boom, boom for efficiency's sake. So I've definitely had that experience. On League, we shot only our own stuff. We didn't even shoot second unit for each other, and I like the purity of that. I mean, going to the second unit thing is that when you shoot second unit or you pick up someone else's, a scene from their episode, you've not been living in it. It ignores all the prep and thought and the philosophy and the approach that went into it. And if you have to shoot someone else's scene, it's probably just for efficiency's sake. It's probably to save the producers and the AD. It's not because someone doesn't want to do it. So you just have to go in and go, well, I don't know what they meant to do. I'll just try to honor what they have been doing. And, ask the operators and the DIT to show you reference material, thematically how their episode is progressing. But ideally, I would just rather do all my stuff and they do all their stuff. And a little second unit is fine. But yeah, I just like the purity.
Yeah, I mean, obviously
vision.
picking up like an insert shot of somebody signing a piece of paper or something like that's less of a concern than like, here's a whole scene with with main characters doing something in the middle of the episode.
Right. And I've done that also. Yeah, I've totally done that, but not on A League of Their Own.
You brought up earlier that you love the speakeasy, like the look of a speakeasy. What is it that you love about the look of a speakeasy?
What I love about speakeasies, what I've read about speakeasies and what I really gravitate towards when they're portrayed in movies and whatnot is that they're very intimate. They're intimate and they're bold. And there's an authenticity to people there that is not shared in the public, regardless of what decade they happen. And so it's that combination that I love. And there's something very naughty about them, from how you get there through the alleyway and all that to the drink that you order and what you wear and who else is there. And sometimes you have like a special name. So it's fun from a modern day perspective. And also I just have admiration, if you will, for certainly the characters in our show, because it was seen as subversive at the time, but for them, it was a place of community. So I just love that about speakeasies or house parties. For Max's story, someone who was Black and queer could not just go to a bar, like any bar, I'm sure. So the same kind of intimate environment, being your authentic self, would have to exist in a house party back in the 1940s. But then also in that authenticity, you get to be loud and nonconformist, which just brings all sorts of great visuals. So like all the movies for like men wearing hats or like feathers and boas. And it's just, a visual like extravaganza. It probably comes from me reading Great Gatsby when I was a kid and just being like just in awe of like, jazz age visuals and all the art that came out around then, like lots of gold and feathers and outrageousness and drinks and however it's portrayed. It just seems really sexy and alive. And
it's kind of weird. Like the more repressive society is, like the more vibrant counterculture becomes. Yeah, just whatever the counterculture is, I mean, even if you just think about like speakeasies themselves, I don't know the actual origin, but I'm assuming it has something to do with prohibition,
right?
And creating kind of like a secret underground world. And then that allows other people who have been forced underground for whatever reason, like being LGBT or whatever, to seek that out. How did you go about shooting the speakeasy stuff that you did for A League of Their Own?
So the speakeasy scene, there's two main scenes there. They're pretty large. We only had a day and a half to shoot those two very large scenes.
You shot all that in a day and a half?
Thank you. Yes.
I can't believe you shot all that in a day and a half. That's insane. There's so much. Oh my God.
Yeah. Someone brought up the other day about TV schedules being luxurious, and I laughed because most episodes are 8 or 9 day episodes. So there's nothing luxurious about television. At least I'm not elevated to that level of like 5 months. I mean, I'm sure like Game of Thrones, like 5 months per episode, 20 months per episode. But
I think it's luxurious if you grew up making the A-Team or something. It's like, oh, you got 8 days. That's twice as much as we had.
A-Team. I love that you went to A-Team. Your references are awesome. So we had a day and a half to do these two scenes plus spoiler, the raid on the speakeasy. So this involved,
I know that's
most of the
cast. Not an uncomplicated sequence.
Yeah.
How many pages was that though?
I mean, it's not a lot of pages. It's like, Atlanta Burns is one line, but there wasn't a lot of pages. But what we wanted to get across was very big. And for budgeted time, a lot of things had to be truncated. And it works really well. I mean, I never talk about being proud of my work, but I'm really proud of this episode. And so we had this day and a half, and it involved a good chunk of our peaches, of our main cast, plus Rosie O'Donnell, plus a bunch of extras and background who all had to go through the works of hair, makeup, and costumes.
Yeah.
We had light cues. We had a musical number. And it was a set, but it wasn't a real set. It was the production designer turned the basement of our stages into the set. So we had hard ceiling. So it's not, I mean, it was only part of the stage in the sense that I would drive to work and I could go to it. But in terms of the ease of shooting a stage, none of it was there. It might have been a real location because we were just shooting in a basement. And so one of the best ideas that I put to use on this, and I am grateful to the director and the producers to just give me the go ahead and trust that it would work, was to shoot all of it with 2 Steadicams working simultaneously. And since then, I've heard other DPs or other operators, and I think sometimes when operators say this is from a place of ego, that you can't do 2 Steadicams working at once. And I'm like, actually, you can't.
In a confined space, no
with
less.
multiple actors, yeah. And it worked really, really well. And I always think like, you follow the interview now. Like one of the things I muse about is like, where does great cinematography come from? Because I feel like most cinematographers can do a lot of things, but a lot of us aren't doing great cinematography. And I think it comes to trust, that you just need to have whoever hired you trust you, and that your crew trusts you. And that doesn't happen all the time. So, ask everyone. It just does not happen all the time.
I believe you. And also, like the conversation comes up sometimes why DPs get the reputation for being, shall we say, Grumpy Pantses.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that like, I always think of it as like you're painting a painting and you're like really focused on it, and every 5 minutes someone comes up and goes, how much longer? Hey, do you need green? Hey, when are you gonna be done? Like, it's like hard to, like what you're doing is so, this is why I do this podcast.
Yeah.
What you're doing to me is, it's voodoo. I don't understand it. I don't understand what you're talking about, when it works beautifully.
Yeah.
What makes that come together?
Yeah. It makes such a difference when someone just says, this is my vision. And even though I'm not shooting film anymore, I would still love to, but even though I'm not shooting film anymore, there's still something about the cinematographer being in control of the magic box and people being nervous about only one person really having control over what happens in the magic box. And when everyone just said, okay, this is what we want to do, we trust you. And then you actually get to do something incredible given the time and the budget. And so, like I said, I made a day and a half. I had both Steadicams working, and they're both really great Steadicam operators. So it was like they both just are amazing, and they're elegant, and their focus pullers are really strong. So I just had a really great team. So it wasn't a concern that I had to watch over anything. And I was like, okay, the director described, he had his blocking, whatever, and he was open to massaging the marks in order for us to get the whole scene done in our limited amount of time. And I'd have one operator take over the start of a scene and then stay at the table. And then the second operator laying in wait to pull Abby from that same table and bring her to the bar. And I was lit for all of that. My gaffer job was just fantastic, and like with our lighting cues and whatever. And so it felt a little hectic in the moment, but the amount of coverage we got that felt seamless, it would be impossible without having two Steadicam operators. Because, most of the times when we have one Steadicam operator, they either have to do everything or they do the majority of it, and then the B cam will sneak in and get a piece of coverage. And the flow feels different when someone comes in with a dolly to do a piece of coverage or handheld or whatever. It just feels different. And here it was Steadicam to Steadicam. And there's a wonderful scene where the couples are dancing, and we wanted to capture multiple couples dancing with the cameras going around. And we just did not have the time, but because only one Steadicam, to give everyone their due respect of having a camera going around them and circling them and giving them several takes and several different lens sizes and not feel hurried. And because I had two Steadicam operators, one operator took one section of the room, the other operator took the other section of the room, circled different dancers, changed lens, circled again. And we just got a ton of footage in a very short period of time. And then I think all of that actually was all done in one day. And then day two was the police raid. And we might have had a little Steadicam there, and then we went handheld. And then, of course, both operators were working. But yeah, it absolutely can work if you have faith and you trust both your operators and you have a plan on how to make it work. So I love that scene immensely. And I'm really just adore my crew.
Who were the Steadicam operators?
Janice Min and Michael Craven. And they were just fantastic.
So I know you can't talk very much about it, but you are, as we're speaking now, you're working on a new sci-fi series.
Yes, called Beacon 23.
What are you allowed to say?
What am I allowed to say about Beacon 23? That it's amazing, that it's really fun to shoot something that is completely different from everything I've ever done. My last two shows were period pieces, plus, doing the second unit for Rap Shit. So this takes place in outer space, and there's a lot of psychological horror involved. There's a lot of visual effects, which is fun because I really wanted to do more visual effects. There's a ton of stunt work. I feel like there's permanently a V on the slate, which is really great because I always said I want to do more visual effects, like working with visual effects artists. And so there's a ton of that. There's a ton of stunts. I love doing stunts so much. We all joke there's a lot of pew, pew, pew. There's a lot of that going on. It's fun, and it's really enjoyable to do a show that not only was it nice, it's nice to do something that's science fiction and futuristic, which I've never done before. It's just sort of nice on my heart to just do something that's kind of fun.
Yeah. Inventive.
Yeah, exactly. It's very inventive. And like, props people are always showing you some prop that they made that, helps someone go light speed or something. You're like, okay, sure. All right. It's just, it's like you're back in the sandbox. You're 5 years old back in the sandbox and you have a really great stick. And the stick is called a blah, blah, blah laser. And so that's what we're doing. So I'm doing that for 3 months. That I can definitely say. And it's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome. I think that's a great place to stop too, but I want you to go make some more horror movies so we can talk about them.
Thank you. I agree.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. For everybody who has Amazon Prime, check out A League of Their Own right now. It's really great. You shot, I believe, episodes, 4, 6, and 8?
Correct.
But watch the whole show. It's a great show. Before we go, is there any place people can find you or your work online?
You can certainly find me on Instagram and Twitter, Cybel DP. And same for my website, if you want to see some of my work, is cybeldp.com.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, and we'll have you back when we can talk more about your sci-fi show.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right, so that was Cybel Martin. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Cybel. Can't wait to see the sci-fi series that you're working on right now. That'll be badass, I think. And can't wait to see what you do next.
And now, short ends.
All right, Ben, it is short end time. What is your obsession this week? What are you all about?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily an obsession for me this week, but I like to highlight craft-based YouTube channels that I find myself returning to over and over again. And there's an amazing one that has a great YouTube component, also just has a great standalone website. It's called Texture Labs, and you can find them at texturelabs.org. It's a guy named Brady who's a graphic designer, and what he does is he goes through Photoshop and After Effects tutorials, and it's a lot of stuff about titling or using tools like After Effects and Photoshop to kind of create interesting looks, images. He's somebody who does title design for trailers and stuff like that, so he knows of what he speaks. He walks you through it pretty simply. He shows you the setup, and on texturelabs.org, they actually have all these cool textures you can just download. There's tons of them. And they come in really handy, and some of them are kind of like grungy, like if you wanted to make something look like a photocopy or a punk rock poster or something like that. Or even if you're doing typesetting and you want your type to be grungy in the background, not to be grungy, but you don't want to like download a font that has that baked in. I don't know about you. Whenever I'm looking at like a title design, if the same letter appears in the title twice, my eye goes right to, like, let's say there's 2 lowercase a's in the title. If the grungy stuff is in the exact same place on both, I'm like, you lazy fuck, you just used some out-of-the-box font.
Papyrus!
But like, you just went on defont.com and downloaded a grungy looking font. Whereas if you know what you're doing, you could take, again, a pretty basic font like Arial Black or something, lay a texture over it. And if there's 2 lowercase a's, the grungy stuff won't be in the same place on both. And there's so many interesting techniques that you can use in these programs to do just really phenomenal title design, and his tutorials kind of walk you through it pretty clearly and kind of give you the tools to kind of play around with it on your own. Sometimes I just watched one recently about a blend mode in Photoshop that it's one of the ones that it's difference mode, which I've probably never used in my life, and he explains why you would use it. And it's a little techie, nerdy stuff, but I think for anyone who's editing a project or putting a project together, you have had to do title design.
I appreciate your attention to detail with the fonts and titles, and I don't mean to mock you with the reference to the Saturday Night Live short Papyrus, which I'm going to ask Alana Cody to put a link in the show notes now because I've just...
I didn't know that there was one.
You didn't know what I was saying with Papyrus? Ryan Gosling did this Saturday Night Live sketch called Papyrus, and now I will share that with you, and you can have the moment of reflection here. You are the Ryan Gosling in your short end this week. You are obsessed with a font and effect and a thing, and it's like
it will not be the first nor the last time that someone has said I am the Ryan Gosling in a certain situation.
Every time you take off your shirt, you're the Ryan Gosling
every time.
in that situation.
People are always like, Ben, will you stop being a fucking Gosling? Sorry, man, I am potty mouth tonight. Sorry about that. Sorry, audience.
Anyway, so I'm glad that you found a cool resource. Now you get to enjoy the Ryan Gosling short when our host raps are done today. So,
well, and I'll share the Comic Sans song with you. Do
you have a joke about Helvetica too? You want to get into this?
No, I don't have any good Helvetica or Arial Black or
Wingdings. You got no Times New Roman.
Zaps, dingbats. No, nothing. I got nothing. Anyway, Elias, so what is your short end this week?
Oh, wow. This is going to be contentious for you because my short end this week is What We Do in the Shadows. And you and I spoke last week, and you told me that that's not exactly the show for you, that you don't watch that show. And I don't know what it is that rubs you about that show because it is my catnip. I am loving this show, and I am catching up on old episodes that I missed from a few weeks ago. And I swear, I think the show has never been better. And yes, it's a little bit of a shtick, but the shtick completely works for me, and I am not alone. I was in a Trader Joe's the other day and overheard the crew of the Trader Joe's all talking about how much they enjoyed a recent episode of What We Did in the Shadows. And I got to give props.
I'm not trying to yuck anyone's yum here. I get why people like it. It's just not my thing. And it should be. On paper, it sounds exactly like something I would love. Taika Waititi, whose work I adore, doing kind of a horror comedy thing. And when I hear the concept, it's a little bit like Seinfeld to me. Someone will tell me what happened in an episode of Seinfeld and I'll think it's hilarious. But if I ever try and watch Seinfeld, I just can't. It just never works. I don't know why it doesn't work for me. Obviously it works for most other people. So, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying it's just not for me.
It's just not for you. I understand. Okay. And you're wrong. So I'm going to give this a thumbs up to your thumbs sideways down. So, I love it, and props to DJ Stipson, who has shot most of it looks like the show so far, and it was nominated for a Primetime Emmy, and it's really been so much fun. And if you've got Hulu, and I got to give props to Hulu because I think we were talking earlier in the Close Focus about like a curated experience and what sort of experience that we're going to expect from streaming services. I think the better the curation, the better that they understand who their viewers are. I fully expect that in the next 5 years, the Netflixes and the HBOs out there and the Apple TVs are going to have some sort of AI personality sort of host, if you will, that's really going to be like, delivering and selling you on all of the different things that they offer. Netflix tried this years ago and failed spectacularly with a sort of disembodied voice they had called Max. I don't know if you remember this, but
I don't, and that sounds horrifying.
It was really kind of a failed one size fits all curation sort of algorithm. So it was like, oh, you gave a couple of these things thumbs up, so you might like this. I must have tried it 50 times, and the only thing that came out of it that was any good that I actually really liked was Luther. And I got to say, it was great that, a stopped clock is still right twice a day. It was right on with Luther, and I highly recommend that series. But everything else they served up to me was like, what the F? What's this? But that's the future.
If they have an AI curating it, I want it to be a real AI that I can design using like Midjourney. So it can be like a screaming face made out of hands that's saying like, maybe you would enjoy the Good Place. And it'd be like, oh yeah. Thank you, screaming face made out of hands.
Yes, and I think for other people, it might be like, Wilfred Brimley. It's going to be, Don Knotts. It's going to be some sort of... it's going to be somebody who, it could be someone beloved who, it could be James Dean. You don't know. Someone's going to be your personal Sherpa who's going to, shepherd you through your trials of trying to pick out what it is you're going to watch.
I guess I'm down for that, but
hey there, young fella. Let me show you about Pepperidge Farm.
Ongoing argument that I have with Kays Alatracci, our beloved Kays Alatracci, is like the degree to which we're going to have AI doing everything. And I'm like, all we have to do now is train AI to watch and enjoy movies, and then AI can make movies that only AI watches.
AI movies will be terrible. But I do think that like Spotify has gotten very, very good with their algorithm about predicting what, if you like this playlist, you might also like these other things. I expect that is going to continue with movies and personalities and all kinds of stuff. So the computer systems will be pretty good at guessing what it is that you're going to be interested in. And they're going to be able to have that information without you having to upvote it or downvote it, just by the fact that they're going to see what it is that you're watching and decide from there.
I'm in big trouble because I have a tendency to put on something I'm only mildly interested in and then fall asleep.
Yeah, eclectic taste will still work. I have a feeling that they're going to get much better at, those with a really eclectic taste and saying, hey, you might want to watch this even though it's not your usual sort of thing. It's going to take a while. It's going to take years. But I do think that this is coming. I think that turns out we're more predictable than we think we are. That's all I will say about it. But anyway, What We Do in the Shadows.
That's fair.
Really like it. Really enjoying it. Taika Waititi. I mean, the guy is. I don't know if you watched Reservation Dogs. Everything this guy touches, I feel like turns to gold. It's so good.
He's pretty amazing. And I actually tweeted about this recently. Like Jojo Rabbit only came out 2 years ago, and I feel like we don't talk about it very much. And Jojo Rabbit is genius. And Taika Waititi was obviously already on my radar when I saw that movie, but I feel like him directing a movie in which he himself plays Hitler kind of thrust him into the spotlight in a way, that I wasn't ready for. And like when I was watching the Lightyear movie with my son, and I caught his voice, and I'm like, I think that's Taika Waititi. And sure enough, Taika Waititi doing voice acting in the Lightyear movie. Like, guys, he's awesome. I'm very impressed with his just kind of boundless talent.
Yeah, agreed. All right, Ben, before we thank some people, where can people find you?
You can find me at benrock.com. Go to benrock.com. You can find my social media links. You can check out my reel. Friend me wherever friends go online to be friendly with one another. Ilya, where can people find you?
You can find me over at Hot Red Cameras, hotredcameras.com, and most of the social medias, although I'm fairly poor about checking some of these Instagram messages I've gotten lately. If you've been messaging me there, my apologies. I'm a little tardy on that. I'll try to get better in the future.
Man, I get a lot of Instagram messages explaining to me how I can get rich with cryptocurrency.
Yes, I get one or two of those, and people asking me if I'll try their generic sunglasses or, bikinis or whatever the hell they're offering. Yeah.
Crazy. Anyway, well, Ilya, let's go ahead and thank our intrepid producer, Alana Cody, who is, as always, producing up a storm. Got more interviews coming out really soon, and just keeps us on a schedule. If you like listening to this show once a week, you have Alana Cody to thank for that, because by golly, when it was just the two of us, it'd be like once every 3 months.
Yeah, it was like, hey, should we be doing something about this tonight? It's too late. And now we got someone cracking the whip. Yeah. it's happening.
Awesome. We should go ahead and thank Ben Katz. Ben Katz, who edits every episode and manages to make you and me not sound like the total idiots that we are.
Thanks, Ben Katz.
And last but not least, we got to thank Kenny Zalatracci, who created every scrap of music that you heard on this podcast. Check out his website, musicbykays.com. For God's sakes, will somebody just email Kays on his website and say, we like your music? You don't have to do anything. It doesn't cost you anything. Just go to his website, musicbykays, KAYS.com, and hit the contact button or whatever, and just say, hey, we enjoyed your music on the Cinematography podcast. He's not going to charge you any money. Just do that. Just be nice. We recently found out literally no one's ever reached out to him from the podcast. We've been doing this thing for like 8 years.
You'll be glad you did. If you reach out to him, you'll be glad you did. It's very unlikely you will regret reaching out to Kays.
He's one of the most talented people I've ever known.
All right, Ben, I think that just about does it for this week. There's nothing left to say.
We're out of stuff to say, so we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening.
This has been the Cinematography Podcast, presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory on the web at hotrodcameras.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our show on iTunes and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.